Thank you, TC.
Yeah, no problem.
I need a password for Facebook.
Right, but you
I can text Brandon.
We're streaming YouTube. We're live. Should be live. You want to have Tracy check or somebody check?
Tracy,
Yes, ma'am.
Can you check the YouTube?
could we have
I think
your
I just,
assistance?
do you know the YouTube channel?
I didn't think we had to know that. I think Brandon does that all from, all you have to do is turn this on.
Yeah, I think I got it. I just wanted to double check by opening the YouTube.
I have no idea. I'm sorry, I'm no help.
That's fine.
Oh, it is on. Oh, yay.
Super straight.
So that's going to be broadcasted?
No, it's just going to be recorded. It's not live streamed, it's being recorded.
I understand that. They said that to me once, but now it's not.
That's okay.
Because
Because we can either record it there or you can record it, but we've got to have a memory card.
Live.
I tried that.
Oh,
So we're
yeah.
gonna let
I
Diana
like four.
Diane,
Carson, she was asking us
so
to
we
live
are
stream it.
live.
We're live right now.
why are we live?
It's like,
That's what Diana asked.
Well,
Well,
she
can we FaceTime her?
she just wanted to know how we were broadcasting. She wanted to know how we were broadcasting.
We got her.
Do you want me to end the live then?
No. Whatever Brandon set up.
Oh, this is Brandon navigating it?
Yeah.
This was open from this morning.
Well, so Brandon was.
Yeah, I just-
He left it that
He
way.
left that way, so I
So
just had
I'm
to click a
supposed
button
to
and
tell
start.
her we are
Yeah, it's live.
Just like you're watching church.
Yeah, it's the Argos UMC YouTube channel. I can't do Facebook right now.
I'm Tracy.
Technically, my name's Bobby, but
We are live, Argos UMC YouTube channel. Yeah, she's just in Florida and wanted to know if
Oh, yeah.
there was going to be a recorded or streamed. Okay, well, thanks, honey.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Brandon left this all open because if he hadn't, I wouldn't be able to do it.
Oh, well, yeah. And the gentleman that spoke, the same gentleman that spoke at another church, they did just a sound recording.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so, you know.
Should I think what's this one is? Okay. Yeah, everything's ready to go. Is he just gonna use the handheld?
show
then?
you pinky.
Is that what? That's what Max said.
It's up there as you, yeah, it's up there.
Big, fluffy rabbit. It's on the other side of that wall. Is there a wall in there? Yeah. Cabinet right there. Can't see. There's a big bat. He's big enough. He has to put on the grill. And barbecue meat. Yeah, just like that.
Yeah.
that's right, it's a good one too.
She's on her way.
Huh?
She's on her way.
Are they recording it or taping it?
It's live stream on YouTube.
Oh, it is?
I just started the live stream.
You're just like an Ohio State player.
Well, I know, because you ought to go harder.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, Gene gets the Gene reads it. And then you can read from that Gene.
There's the news. I hate that. 90%.
No, I'm not seeing one.
Do we really want to know?
They haven't got a name for that plant where I'm at.
You're doing all three, right? Live streaming and recording it.
Yeah, it's on YouTube right now.
So you're gonna,
It's on right now.
what is it? Okay.
Yeah.
You doing okay?
Mm-hmm.
Do you need help or anything? You got lights and everything if you got to those?
Yeah.
If you need help, just get me.
You're on camera right now.
What's that?
You're on camera, so don't do anything dumb.
You get the fun job.
Oh yeah.
This is the tech. I'm gonna say this is. I love doing this. Oh, this board looks so familiar. Now, is this an Allen Heath or?
No, yeah, no, I think it's
Oh, it's
Soundcraft.
Soundcrest. Yeah. I want to say we had. I think one of the churches I served had this board. Is it a 32 or 16? I'm trying to do a fast count. Looks like a 16.
I think it's a 16.
Yeah.
Or, no, it's a 32.
32. Okay, good.
Yeah, I'm not usually the one that does sound. I know how. I know how to be in a replacement.
The nice thing with the analog board, if you've got one channel, you've got them all.
Yeah.
The digital boards are a little screwier because you got three. Have you run a digital board?
No.
So you got a button that you push and that runs in sections. And so you get 32 channels, but you get it in 3 different graphs.
This is about as complicated as I can do. I can do this part. I'm not good with the sound part.
Oh, I hear. Okay, you're video dude.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. You got the mic on?
It's all.
I'm gonna open in prayer.
Do you want to use the handheld?
Yeah, I'm just gonna do it.
Okay. Yeah, because when you walk around with it while it's still on, it just makes lots of
Yeah, so
annoying sounds.
do you want me to turn it off at the mic, or are you gonna turn it off? Because I'm gonna pray and then probably just hand it over to Scott. Oh, no, I'm gonna hand it to him.
Yeah, just go ahead and turn it off.
Turn
on
off at the
there.
mic?
Yeah, so once you...
He's got it on, I got the button.
Okay, that's what I was asking. I'm gonna turn it on, I'm gonna do the
So
prayer.
you got it off up there.
And then when after I'm done praying, I'm gonna turn it on and give it to you. this opportunity to just, excuse me, I'm so sorry. Lord, be with us this evening as we focus on the inner workings of your church. We just ask for your leadership. We ask for your guidance. And Father, we just ask for your continued love and grace. And we ask and say all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.
So I just want to introduce Scott Patterson, representing from the Global Methodist Church, and he'll give a presentation and then open it up for any questions that you have. Scott?
Well, hey, thank you. It's good to be able to be here with you all. I'm just going to move over here. That's where you all landed. I had one guy said a pastor was always frustrated because the church would sit, people would come in and sit in the back. And so when church started after the first hymn, he grabbed a stand and he moved to the back of the room and he goes, okay, now we got everybody up front. If we've not had the opportunity to meet yet, we've been around. Just to let you know who I am a little bit. My dad was a United Methodist pastor. He passed 4 years ago, February 1. I've lived in Methodist and United Methodist parsonages most of my life. I was called into ministry at Epworth Forest the summer before my junior year in high school. I was on the youth delegation to annual conference as a teenager. I don't know if you know Mike Dominic. He was a pastor around. He was our leader of that, and he's since retired and moved to North Carolina. Interesting little bit of tidbit, Lori and I were on the Logan Sport District Youth together back in the day. And so this has been my life. I was served 37 this past summer, 37 years under appointment, and that's been my life. Now, the other thing, I would recommend to absolutely nobody, we were married, and our honeymoon was at License to Preach school. And what happened was, I was finishing up my undergraduate, and my undergrad was an ecumenical. When I went to Taylor, I went for 2 years, Fort Wayne Bible for a year, then finished up my last 37 hours at Huntington. And we had I met my wife. My dad moved from 9 Mile to 12 Mile. And the good news is about being a PK or a TO. TO is theologian offspring. It has a little bit more class than PK. And so the gift of moving is you get to meet people. My wife prayed to marry a pastor, although after 37 and a half years, she's rescinded that prayer different times through those years. But as we were moving into that place, we've been a part of all of, I just lost track of where I was going, telling side stories. So this is part of who I am, and I know what it was. So as we were moving our last 37 years, met my wife in the move. I didn't think I was moving. I thought I was going to be a lifeguard at one of our missions down in Kentucky. Actually got the job. And then I said, well, good, when do I start? And I called them, I said, I hadn't heard. And they said, well, you got the job. I said, good, when do I start? And they said, well, you didn't reply to our letter. I said, well, good, send me the letter, I'll reply to it, and then I'll be lifeguard. And they said, well, it doesn't work that way. Since we didn't hear from you, we hired somebody. My dad moved from 12 Mile to 9 Mile, so that summer, instead of going to Henderson Settlement and being a lifeguard at one of our United Methodist camps, or mission places, I moved with Mom and Dad. And I met my wife there. And so we had and as we moved, our relationship grew, we wanted to marry, and so we set the date, and then discovered I still had to take one class to get my undergraduate degree. And the problem was I was graduating. And in graduating, that meant I needed a job. I was called into full-time Christian ministry, moving into pastoral ministry, at least kicking the tires of seminary. I finished the candidacy program my senior year in high school, and through college was still in that where is God leading me. And so needed a job, needed a house, and the only way we do that in the Methodist Church is you go to License to Preach school. And the last class I needed was during Indiana's License to Preach school. And so I had to have License to Preach school to be able to get my license to have a job. And so we called around, and East Ohio said, yeah, well, you can come to ours. It was 1 week, not 2 weeks. But the problem was it started July 21. Our wedding date was July 20. So they let us go to our first week of marriage at License to Preach school. And so I tell you all of that I don't come as an outsider. I don't come poking at anything. I come as an insider. I come as one who has been called and has grown up into this. This has been my life. The decisions that we have been a part of, the decisions that I have been a part of personally for our family, for our local congregations, are very personal. They're a part of who I am. They don't come light. They come with deep reverence, deep respect, deep history, and deep emotion. And so I share that with you because you're going through some challenging times. And we people, I'm no longer United Methodist, but that's all I've known. So there's a part of me that still thinks and talks that way. But we have never had to do what we're doing right now. And some people would say we shouldn't be doing what we're doing right now. And what we have been advocating with the groups that I've been working with, as I've shared with the bishop, I've shared with the cabinet multiple times, not that everybody needs to have enough information to make an informed decision. And we have never had to do what we're doing. In 1968, so this church was former EUB or former Methodist? Methodist. So you've been all along. So you just had to add a word. But my wife comes out of the EUB strain. And in 68, when the EUBs and the Methodists merged, nobody batted an eye. We were told what our name was. We were told where everything was going. So we, as the United Methodist Church, have never had to do what we're doing. Now, some churches, in each of the iteration, the EUBs, when the UBs and the Evangelical Association merged in 46, some stayed their own ways and didn't become the EUB. And when the EUBs and the Methodists merged in 68, some Methodists stayed and didn't come along with the United Methodists. Some EUBs stayed and became a different brand. But as a whole, most just did what we're told. And so this is really the first time in our history we've ever had to go, what's going on with this church we love? Trying to understand it and make decisions for our future. We've never had to do that. And so I just want to affirm to you, if it's hard for you, it is. It's hard for me. We never thought we'd have to do this. And so what I've shared is not everybody should go. There are some that like the direction of the United Methodist Church. And I've told the bishop, I told him this multiple times, but definitely stood at the annual conference where our disaffiliation was ratified. I said, if people could reach Jesus with the direction the way the United Methodist Church is going, I hope that. And not everybody should go. Some love and will love the direction of the United Methodist Church, but you need to understand that direction. And not everybody can stay. And our particular church said we could not, where I was wrestling with who the United Methodist Church was becoming, I said I can't stay. And so I come as one this past July. We were one of the first, we weren't the first out. There were a group the year before, but 29 churches disaffiliated in July 1, effective July 1. 5 of those became Global Methodist. And I've been working with the renewal group. And so I'm here to tell you who the Global Methodist Church is. Because who is this group? Who are we? And so there's a couple of metaphors that I'm going to share. They're metaphors that everybody is familiar with. And so when you think about who the Global Methodist Church is, one of the metaphors, some of the imagery that has been used of the United Methodist Church, when it was created in 1968, the metaphor that was used is it's a big tent. It was a 54-year experiment with something that hadn't been tried before. It was called pluralism. So out of the Evangelical United Brethren Church and the Methodist Church, both were doctrinally based. We had doctrine, and in the United Methodist book hymnal, they're actually put into the historical documents. And so you have the book of discipline. And so they were saying, well, we're really not doctrinal. We want to be a big tent. There's room for everybody. So theological pluralism at the inception of the United Methodist Church was started as a theological foundation, the big tent. And so who's the Global Methodist Church? We are the conservative side of the big tent. And so when there has been some challenge and you have that tension, and tents are held up by tension. And so it's been a good tension. It's been an honest conversation, and there are those in the United Methodist Church that say we should not separate because the tension is good. An honest conversation and having all sides is very good. The problem is, over the last few years, from 2016 to 2019, the tension has shifted more progressive, very intentionally. And what happened is, so in 2016, the United Methodist Church was, the General Conference was coming to a high tension, and it was getting ready to erupt in chaos. And so the bishops got together and they said, let's spend 3 years prayerful reflection, and after 3 years prayerful reflection, we're going to end this debate once and for all. It's been a debate since 1972, when the language in the United Methodist Book of Discipline was included, and the language was inserted that all people are sacred, value, and worth. However, we believe that homosexuality is incompatible with Christian teaching. And so that was the first time that language was voted on. It was voted on 16 times in 54 years. And so from 2016 to 2019, we spent 3 years of prayerful reflection. And when we gathered back together at General Conference 2019, what happened? So in 2016, a group was created out of the renewal movement of the United Methodist Church. You may have heard of the Good News movement. You may have heard of the Confessing movement. And so these have been renewal groups. We have different caucuses and different groups that are feeling that the United Methodist Church should go different ways. That's part of the tension. And so the Global Methodist Church has come from the conservative side of the tent. It's come from renewal groups. And so in 2016, the Good News and the Confessing movement got together and they said, okay, in the next 3 years, something's going to happen. And the tension was mounting. That's why the special called General Conference of 2019 was called. And so they went to the Episcopalians and they went to the Presbyterians and they said, what do you wish you would have known when you went through this about a decade or so ago? And they said, when our churches could not stay, they scattered. And so the Wesley Covenant Association was created to end. It was started to be a life raft. That if people could not stay in the United Methodist Church, we would be a life raft to move people from one place to the next. In 2019, then, after 3 years of prayerful reflection, the General Conference met, and it went in a direction nobody thought it was going to go. Literally, because they never really populated the traditional plan, and that, for the 16th time, the same language was voted on. Actually, was made a little bit more conservative. And yet the rebellion ensued because the bishops and the leadership of the United Methodist Church said, we absolutely disagree, and we think it's wrong. Our bishop the Bishop of Indiana is on record as saying the Book of Discipline has it wrong in this area. And so what we saw was this whole notion of rebellion ensued. And at that point, the Wesley Covenant Association said our metaphor has to shift. Because renewal is not an option. We've tried for 54 years to renew the United Methodist Church. The tension is not healthy because we spend every 4 years gearing up for a fight. And then we fight, and then we have a general conference, we have an election, and we get back. And so the metaphor shifted to we're going to midwife a new expression of Methodism. We're going to birth a new denomination. And so I've been a part of the Indiana chapter board of the WCA since its inception. The last couple of years, I have actually been the chair of the WCA board. I worked with over 1,000 people globally, writing the different things to come in to go, who is the Global Methodist Church? And so when we think about who we are, that we're now in the process of midwifing. And so we've been waiting for General Conference to happen. And so our congregation met February 2nd, 2020, and we thought General Conference is coming up in 2020, and we need to be informed. And we had, a couple of General Conference delegates in our church that were there in 2016 and there in 2019, and so they were talking, and our church said, if things change, we don't feel comfortable staying. But we've been waiting. We're going to wait for protocol. It might have been a phrase you've heard. And I'll let you do a deeper dive in the protocol of separation. It's now completely off the table, but that was one of the options, and so we said, well, we're going to wait. The problem is, COVID happened about a month after we had this meeting. And then General Conference was moved from 2020 to 2021. And then to 2021 to 2022. So we're waiting for 2022. Protocol for separation was an amicable way to separate. It was virtually unheard of to be able to have this kind of a healthy conversation and even separation. And then it was pushed down to 2024. And what happened was over 200 churches at that point had been leaving. And the leadership said, you know, our original metaphor was to be a life raft for churches that could not stay. And another 2 years, the tension is going to be such that we've got to change our metaphor, and we're moving, and we are in midwifing, and now we've got to launch. So May 1, the Global Methodist Church became official. Now, some people will say, well, we don't know what they believe. Well, here is the transitional book of doctrine and discipline, because we believe doctrine is a very important thing. So we're moving back to being doctrinal, as well as having a book of discipline. Now, then people will say, well, it's never been voted on at a general conference. And what's interesting is our Transitional Leadership Council has ratified that. They're our global governing body who is leading the Global Methodist Church. The years going up into that has the Wesley Covenant Association, helping midwife, have put this together. Every Global Methodist church, every Global Methodist pastor that comes in ratifies this. So this is a legal ratified document. We're not waiting on anybody, but it will be tweaked as each United Methodist Book of Discipline every 4 years is up for conversation when we have our convening conference. Probably second, third quarter of 2025, this will be talked about and it will be modified. And so what's fascinating, when the United Methodist Church came together in '68, they ran out of time, and so they called another conference in 1970. And they ran out of time, and it wasn't until 1972 there was even a book of discipline produced. But from day one, the Global Methodist Church has had a book so people can read and go, well, what do they believe? It's ratified from day one. My church, myself, and others who are part of the Global Methodist Church have ratified it. So it's a legal working document of what we believe. You can go on our website, you can download the PDF, you can open up the different buttons to read what we believe. We're waiting to have a general conference because we want as many people to have voice on the waiting. And we think that's an exciting thing. And Bishop Trimble called me up one day and he says, now Scott, can we agree that the Indiana Conference of the United Methodist Church, can we understand where it is? Yeah, Bishop, I was born in this and I understand. We can agree where the Indiana Conference has been up to now. But I said, as we look at the jurisdictional conference, as we look at the Beloved Community Report, and we look at the different reports, we're beginning to see some shifts. And so I'm concerned in the next 2 years, this conference that I've been a part of and have served in, I see it beginning to shift. Now, he goes, now, can you agree that we really don't know what's going on with the Global Methodist Church, and we don't really know where it is, and we have no idea where it's going? And I said, well, Bishop, I can say we know exactly where both are today. And both will change in 2 years. And so we have to look at where is the direction of the intent of both groups. And what I would encourage you to do is, why has God called you to be a church here? Because you're called to reach this area for the sake of Jesus Christ. Every church should be more worried about reaching your community than anything else. So first of all, you've got to go, who are we and who has God called us to reach? And once you know that, then you can just simply say, and this is what our church did, where's the best alignment? Is the best alignment with the United Methodist Church, or is the best alignment with the Global Methodist Church? We actually, as the WCA, put together a document that actually has 10 choices. And so we're not trying to say, because we don't think the Global Methodist Church is the right place for everybody. We think for those who cannot stay United Methodist, and for many, we think we're a solid option because we're who you've known. We're made up of the network of churches who you've been a part of. It's a theology and an expression that you're familiar with. So we think it's a solid option if you can't stay. But for those who don't want to leave, we're not a good option. For those who are going independent, those who are going free Methodist, we're not a good option. And so one of the things that we say, we'll do you better, we'll help you find that place for you to land. Because you've got to find that best place. You've got to know who you are, first of all, and then where's your best alignment. So who are we? We're formed with leaders that you know and trust. We're centered on maintaining Wesleyan doctrine and theology based on Scripture. Again, we're doctrinally based. We're the conservative side of the Big Tent, and so we understand our theology from a more orthodox, historical, traditional. The old word was conservative understanding. In the Big Tent of the United Methodist Church, you have across the theological spectrum. So that's who we are. We're the conservative side of the Big Tent. We prioritize evangelism and church planting. We're going back to our roots as Methodists, and we think evangelism and church planting because only church disciples make disciples and churches make churches. And we're working to empower local congregations, not just to be who you're called to be, to make your ministry where you are, but we'll help you begin to launch and build ministry and plant churches. We're going to have a leaner, more effective denominational structure. So I not only am the official global church organizer, basically my job is to make sure people have understanding, and if they can't stay, that they at least know where a solid place to land is, and to go and share these kind of conversations with you. Who are you? What do you do? My role has shifted. In this past fall, we were given permission to start what's called a Transitional Conference Advisory Team. It's called a TCAT. And our job is to create a provisional annual conference. So I'm leading the team that is creating the local provisional annual conference. We're creating, so when you say, those people out there, we don't have any local structure. Well, yes, we do. We do have structure. We've actually made some appointments. We are actually working with pastoral and church alignments. We are in the process, actually, that we just had a meeting this past weekend. We'll have some public information over the next couple of weeks, but we have firmed up some alliances, some partnerships with our neighbors, and moving forward. And as early as this fall, we'll have a provisional annual conference in the state and in the area. And so our structure is local. It's one of my jobs to lead the team to help create that. And then the Transitional Conference Advisory Team ceases to exist. So we create things so they go away because the job is to create stuff. And so we're in the process of creating a local annual conference. Now, when you look at the global church and you look at the local level, when we put structure together, it's what I call movemental structure. We all understand movemental structure because we have bones. You know, if we didn't have bones, we'd just be, I don't know if you're a Star Trek fan, there's this one episode in the original series talks about baggy, there was an alien that talked about ugly bags of water because they were trying to figure out who these humanoids were. And without bones, we would just be ugly bags of water and bone and tissue. So structure of the bones help us to move. And so when we're putting structure together, we're not creating an institution that just becomes an institution. We're creating lean structure. Those of us that are traveling and working, there's only 8 paid staff in the global Methodist Church right now. I'm doing this for free. Everybody else is doing this for free because we believe in the movement. We're keeping our structure lean. And we're doing this because we believe in the movement. And we're not offended if you don't choose to go our way, but we think we're a solid option, so we're helping to make sure you understand your options. We're prioritizing the work of the local church. My training and background is church revitalization. So my goal is to always help, no matter what. And I've told the cabinet and the bishop, with my training, I don't have to just work with global Methodists. I'll work with anybody. My ministry coach is Sam Rayner, who's a Baptist. And so I think we work for the sake of Christ to help churches understand who they are, to be able to reach their community for the sake of the gospel of Jesus Christ. We believe that there's going to be more resources, and we're structuring more resources to the local church level. So connectional giving as a United Methodist is 11.5%. Is that what it's a tithe plus. So what does the tithe plus mean?
10% of the conference, 1%.
1%, okay, thank you. So it's a tithe plus, and it has changed a little bit through the years, but currently it's 10% to the conference, 1% to the district, 11%. Globally, in the Global Methodist Church, it would be 2% to start. 1% to the global, 1% local. As we create the local annual conference, we'll create a budget, so we have not decided what that is yet. It will never go beyond 5.5% at the local level, and 5% at the local level, 1.5% at the global level. So in the transitional book of Doctrine and Discipline, and when it becomes the book of Doctrine and Discipline, it's already written in no more than 6.5% in connectional giving. Because we believe the structure should be lean, and the money should stay at the local level for you to be able to do the ministry that you're doing. And the money that is in the local structure, the staffing and the local annual conference structure, is designed with you in mind. So our superintendents, called presiding elders, the working model we're using, and we're still fine-tuning that. We've got a team over the next 6 months that will fine-tune what it will look like here. But I served on a sub-task force for clergy and church revitalization a couple of years ago. And one of the things we're looking at is what I call a player-coach model. And so that means the path of the presiding elder, the superintendent, is going to be a player-coach. Because we believe the best leadership is going to be somebody who is actively in ministry. My friend Leah Hitty Gregory, Dr. Leah Hitty Gregory, was chair of the Transitional Leadership Council. Now she's presiding elder, actually President Pro Tem at the Mid-Texas. She said, I was an excellent superintendent for 3 years. She goes, when I was a superintendent in Texas, I was excellent for 3 years. She goes, after that, I lost touch with the local church. So part of our modeling of the presiding elder will be seeing 10 to 30 churches. And it'll be a player-coach model from somebody who's a practitioner who's coming alongside going, how do we reach our area for the sake of the gospel of Jesus Christ? Instead of looking at churches as silos, we're going to look at churches as networks. And we're going to go, how is God calling us to reach our area? And so it's just a matter of supporting the local church and to be able to do that best. So those things are still being fine-tuned. So as we create structure, we're figuring and putting those pieces together. But our structure is going to be supporting everything designed to support the local church. And then we're also going to have bishop with term limits. Now that'll be another thing that'll be tweaked. And so if somebody becomes a bishop, the bishop's role is to be missional and theological leader. And that's the role of the bishop, is to be able to go, how is God calling us to reach our area? And leading that way, leading theologically. And so that'll be one of those things that'll be tweaked at the General Conference. Is it 6 years? Is it 8 years? Is it 12 years? That'll be tweaked. People will have voice on the way in to go, what should that term be? And after the bishop has served his or her term, he or she goes back to the local church. because everything goes back to the local church. And can you imagine the decisions of bishops would be very different if they know they had to go back to the local church and live under, it's kind of like government. Our senators would make different decisions if they weren't going to receive their benefits for life. And so we realize there still is a role for bishop, but it's really that overseer, and he or she's going to go back to the local church. There is no mandatory retirement. And so currently in the Global Methodist Church, we have one Bishop Emeritus, Bishop Mike Lowry. He signed my ordination certificate. And we have 2 active bishops. I just spent a weekend with one of them, Scott Jones, and then Mark Webb. And there are active bishops right now, and over the next couple of years, we will be working with what is that role. But what's interesting is the structure we create at the larger level is always to send back to the local church with the local church in mind. There is no trust clause, so currently you don't own your building. Now some people, it's been interesting, I don't know if you've had this, Marty, I know we've heard different ones that have said, we've got our deed in our safe. You want to see our deed? And I'm sure you've had to say the same thing that we've had to tell people. Yeah, that piece of paper in your safe may say deed, and it may say you own it, but you don't own it. Because in 1968, particularly, the trust clause was enacted. In Indiana, you can't take it to court. If you're in Texas, and everything is different in Texas, the Texas law is different, and there have been a couple of churches that said, yeah, we own our property. Well, though you don't, we have the trust clause, and they go, no, we actually own our property. But it's been proven in the courtroom. In Indiana, it will not work. So you don't own your property. The church does. Actually, it's a thing that goes back in our Methodist roots. And it actually goes back with doctrinal history. John Wesley was concerned that the Calvinist Methodists were preaching Calvinist theology. And he said, well, if I own the meeting houses, you have to preach my theology. And so he owned all the preaching houses and then sent his preachers into those. And he said, you're going to preach our theology in our houses. So it started as a doctrinal integrity piece. And it's been through the years. And so if you choose to disaffiliate, you will receive your deed and you will then have your property. In the Global Methodist Church, we will never have a trust clause. And so if you choose to align with us, you will still own your property. If you choose to disaffiliate from us, and we have in our Transsocial Book of Doctrine and Discipline that you can disaffiliate, 90 days of prayerful reflection. We're not going to send anybody to your church. We're going to trust your conversation. We're going to invite you to, if you say, well, I don't like the direction it's going, this isn't a good fit for us, we simply ask you pray about for 90 days, discern, help us understand what that is, and then if you say we can't stay, we'll say, okay, you will still own your property. There's no cost to get in, and there's no cost to get out. And so if you choose to disaffiliate, and you're in the process of discerning whether you should or not, those are the questions we ask. Should we leave? And if you can't, if you feel like you should stay, then stay. If you feel like you can't stay, and that was where we were, we can't stay, that's our first question. The second question is, when should we leave? And right now, there's only one more exit ramp. When we were looking at this, there were 2 with a possibility of 3. But is that correct? There's only one more. This coming annual conference is the only time using paragraph 2553 to disaffiliate.
That is currently, yes.
Okay. And we have asked, and different ones have asked, that there would be a fall special session. What we're hearing is there is no plan for a fall session. What we're also hearing is you can leave any time you want to leave, the way everybody's left before 2553. And that's paragraph 2549.2, is it? 3. Notice the question mark in my voice, so thank you for that. And basically, that's close your church, buy your property back. And so that's always been there, and will always be there. That's an option. Your superintendent will tell you that. And so when we look at this option, if you can't stay, and this is your last exit ramp through paragraph 2553, with the requirements, financial and all of those requirements, which are the debt we already owe. We appreciate Bishop Turnbull, we appreciate the cabinet. That has actually been one of the most fair conferences in our connection in the United States. They're only asking for what's already ours to pay. Last year's apportionment, next year's apportionment, unfunded pension liability, and the retiree health. Those numbers have gone down because of the calculation and the interest rates. But it's really the only debt, it's your debt that they said, well, if you're not going to be with us, we've been carrying your debt for the unfunded pension liability, and if you're not going to be with us, then just pay us your part. So it's been, the Indiana Conference has been very fair in that. And so when we leave, we just say, if you can't stay, we would say, some people are saying, I want to be independent. One, we don't know how to do independent. We're connectional. We've never had to have these decisions before. It's very hard to be independent, but we also understand why people feel like that's a really good idea. But we're connectional. And so we say, use us then as a transition. It's a familiar system with a network of people you're already familiar with and a theology you already know. And have voice on the way in. You get a chance to create something new. Now you got to understand, 2.5% of the people are innovators. They love to create stuff. Some of you here are innovators. You're just tinkering and always getting stuff new. And if it's something's new on the market, you're buying it, you're trying it. There's another 13.5% that are early adopters. So the 16% of the population are always loving new stuff. So when I say, you get a chance to be a part of something historic. You get a chance to be a part of creating a new expression of Methodism. This has happened multiple times. Orange Scott in the mid-1800s says, I can't stay and be a Methodist. And the Wesleyan Church was birthed out of that. The Free Methodist Church, the Nazarene Church. So this is not the only time in history people have said, I can't stay with one of the strains. There's multiple strains of Methodism, but a primary strain. So we've had different people say, I can't stay. And this is this moment in time. So you get a chance to be a part of a historic movement if that's where God is leading you. Some people, about 16% of the population, says, that is awesome. There's another 34%, or they call the early majority, and they're like, okay, there's enough structure. May 1, we're starting to see some things happening. I'm feeling comfortable, especially if you know you can get out without any cost. Okay, we're feeling good. Now, you have the late adopters and the laggards that are like, and these are the people, well, some of these people are going to buy a new model car, which is always interesting, because those principles in the church that we don't want to change anything, these people still buy new cars and new houses and new appliances and all of that. But usually those people are like, I'm not buying a first model car, I'm not buying a second model car, I'm buying a third model car, I'm buying it used. I know it's been tested, and so here's the deal. If you feel comfortable and excited, that's your wiring. And you're going to go, it is awesome to be a part of a new expression of Methodism. And you can have voice on the way in, and we welcome that. We're creating voice in the local annual conference. We're creating voice in the general conference, because we believe that's a value, and to have your voice on the way in. Now, others are like, I'm not sure. So let's wait. Well, here's the deal we'll make, and it's what Keith Boyette has offered to us. It's what we're offering to everybody. It's the decision we made. Is you get voice on the way in, no cost to get in. Once you're in and you cannot, and you go, hey, the decisions that are made, and I don't know that it's there, 90 days, prayerful reflection, you get out. And so we think it's a solid option. If you cannot stay, we think the Global Methodist Church is a solid option, if nothing else, to get your feet underneath you. And then if you are in that discernment process and you can't stay, at least on the local level, because this is the value and the practice that we've already had in the WCA, now the Global Methodist Church, we'll help you discern your best alignment. That's a commitment I'll make to you. Because you have to be where you're best aligned to do the ministry God's called you to be. And we will help make that happen for you. There's robust accountability. So in the Global Methodist Church, accountability is a feature, not an anomaly. Right now, one of the challenges is some jurisdictions are willfully, flagrantly violating the Book of Discipline. And they have been brought up on charges, and the Council of Bishops will not hold one another accountable. This has happened for the last 20 plus years. And so our challenge is the Council of Bishops are not holding each other. There's no accountability. We have 2 churches in Indiana so this past year, Resolution 5 was brought in. I encourage you to take a deep dive into Resolution 5. It was passed last Saturday. It was, we want to live into resolution, or into the beloved community of the jurisdiction. And the writer of that, at the floor of the annual conference with the bishop, said, this is aspirational, because some people said this violates the current book of discipline. How can we bring something to the floor of the annual conference that violates discipline? And the bishop said, well, it's aspirational. And the writer of the resolution interrupted the bishop, and she said, actually, Bishop, I would call it invitation. And there are 2 churches since then, St. Luke's in Indianapolis and Faith in Fort Wayne, that have taken the bishop and the writer up on that aspiration and invitation and have said they're living into the beloved community report. And so our concern is accountability. Where's the accountability? We have a book of discipline, it ought to be enforced. We're not seeing it enforced. We're concerned by that. In the Global Methodist Church, accountability is a feature, not an anomaly. And so when people go, well, how do we know it's not going to go off the rails? Accountability is a feature, not an anomaly. We're coming out of the renewal movement. And so you got to understand, if we're working this hard to renew and understand we don't feel that it can be renewed, we're going to guard the theology, we're going to guard those practices very hard, and accountability is a feature. Strong and clear biblical stances on marriage, sexuality, pro-life, and other bedrock issues. We're truly global. We have a guy in our church that said, we voted 100% discipline, 97% to join the Global Methodist Church. And one guy comes up to me, and you may have this person in your church, and if they're here, don't point them out. But he came up to me and he goes, I voted no. I'm like, I figured you did. Because he usually votes no. It doesn't matter what it is, he just votes no. And so I said, okay, we're still friends, we're still good. You vote your conscience. And then he says, you want to know why? I realized he needed to tell me why. Why? And then he goes, one word. Just tell me already. I said, well, what? And he says, global. I said, I get it. One world order stuff. But here's the cool thing. Now my wife said, do we have to really use Methodists? It's like, yeah, that's kind of who we are. So we're coming in, there are those experiencing, actually on all sides of the tent, denominational PTSD. We're struggling because the fight has been hard, and the tensions have been hard, and hard conversations are there. When you're dealing with trauma and pain, you want to say no to everything. And so we understand that. But the reason the Global Methodist Church, that name was chosen, is we're global from day one. Bulgaria was the very first annual conference that joined this new denomination. And then May 1, the Philippines had a church that started. And since May 1, 2022, that church has now planted 4 other churches, had over 50 baptisms that very first Sunday, and is reaching over 4,000 people. When I'm on leader calls, I'm on a leader call with people from all over the world. We are actively filing papers in the continent of Africa and in other places in Europe and the Philippines. We're being recognized globally. We're a global denomination. We believe that our brothers and sisters are allies. And so when we look at our theology, we look at our understanding, we're not trying to create a U.S.-centric church. We believe that the Scripture and our transitional book of Doctrine and Disciplines are for all. And it should be applied the same in the United States as it is in Africa, as it is in Europe, as it is there. The United Methodist Church is wanting to regionalize, so I would encourage you just to look at what that means, and if you're comfortable with that, you're going to feel good with it. But there's a move to regionalize and say, well, the U.S. church should behave differently than the other places. We had concern with that. To me, that feels racist and colonial. Others feel differently about that. But that's one of the reasons we could not stay. But we're truly global. Greater local church involvement with pastoral appointments. And so, one of the questions that you'll probably have is, well, if your pastor chooses, and I know your pastor, as I talked to him, says, still discernment. And we encourage all pastors to be in discernment and not to be public with that information, because these are local church decisions and pastoral family decisions, and it should be down the road in the discernment. But if the church says we can't stay in and chooses to align with Global Methodist Church, and the pastor says, well, we can't stay and we're going to align with the Global Methodist Church, we're really good with that because we prefer the churches and pastors come together. That's better for everybody. And you're going to have your pastor until you don't have your pastor. We're not going to call you up every January. In the United Methodist Church, every January to June, when the phone rings and the superintendent's named on it, anxiety rises. And the question comes after annual conference is, what's the first thing that you ask your pastor when he or she comes after annual conference? Do we get to keep you? Because we remember, my dad remembers having the wailing and the crying with the reading of the announcements and all the pastors going to the payphone at Purdue University and calling, oh, we just moved, here's where we're going to get the boxes out. And we said, you know, Bishop Mike, I knew it was Jacob Knight, his boy. My second appointment was at Anderson First. That's where Bishop Pointer came out of. Bishop Pointer, when he was our bishop here for 12 years, tried to extend pastoral tenure because he understood the longer pastor people are together, that's better for everybody. And we're going to take it a step further and say, you're there until you're not there. Because if it's going right, why would we mix it up? And then when we have a concern and when we have an understanding, it's a conversation. But you have a player coach who you've been talking with because it's 10 to 30 churches that is our working model to be able to understand how that is. And then you say, okay, our pastor, the church says, this is how it works anyway. If the church says, hey, we think it's time for our pastor to go, the pastor says, I think it's time to go. Now it's an open appointment, and you have a conversation, you do the profiling. And so we will talk about what that looks like. And it's a conversation. Anybody ever watch the show Married at First Sight? It's one of the shows my wife and I like to watch. You have the experts that get together and they find two people that match, and then the first time they meet is at the altar, and then they spend 2 months trying to figure out if they're going to stay married or get a divorce. And I said, that's the way appointments are in the United Methodist Church. And the thing is, I've been in an appointment for 10 years, and 5 is my average as a United Methodist pastor. And I'm being snarky, I'm making a joke about that. But I'm saying that to be able to say, because I know the superintendents work very, very hard to make the best appointments they can make. And they wrestle with it. And the challenge is, so when you look at the franchise of the Global Methodist Church versus the franchise of the United Methodist Church, the big tent, the pool of pastors, so if the pastor sits down with a staff parish, what side of the tent is that pastor from? And I believe the Indiana cabinet is working the hardest they can to align churches. What I do know is 143 churches and have left the United Methodist Church in 2022. And they're from the conservative side of the tent. And so the pool of traditionalist or conservative pastors is just shrinking. The pool of pastors is shrinking. My coach has done studies. They go, where is the 40-year-old pastors? They're not there. I'm 60 years old, and my median age is above the median age of clergy nationwide, regardless of the tradition. And so when you look at pastoral appointments, the franchise of the Global Methodist Church is, you will know the theology sitting down at the table because accountability is a feature, and we vet. And so you will know that the theology of a Global Methodist Church and the Global Methodist pastor match. And I know that the cabinet really works hard to do that, but there's not always solid matches with that, and the pool is going to change. And so that's just something to be mindful of. And that you will have more say on the front end. That's one of the things that's going to be tweaked. But right now we've got a couple of appointments we're working with where we're creating a pool of 2 to 3 people that the staff parish can have conversation with. And we say, these people meet the profile. We think this is a really good option. And what do you think? And then we'll make the final appointment and submit that to the Transitional Leadership Council. When we have our provisional annual conference, we will be meeting them then at the local level. A refined role of the process of bishops, greater admissions through partnership. So many, and I just had this question yesterday, somebody goes, well, if we have missional partners, will we be able to still do our missional partners? And we say, they're your partners. And so if they're your partners and they've been in mission and they come home on furlough, keep them. Our missions chair, when there was a hurricane right after we disaffiliated, and our missions chair said, we're going to give to the Salvation Army. And I said, or you can give to UMCOR, because both are good. And so if you have your missional partners, we still give to a couple of missions that have United Methodist in the name, because they're our partners and we believe they're doing good work. So we're not going to come in and say, you've got to stop all your relationships. Now we have had some people and said, well, hey, we're relooking at our relationships anyway. And so we are looking at offering you some areas, some different people that have been working. But if you have your partners, you should keep them. We've actually said no to 2 local missions, but not because we're Global Methodist, but because they said they're not explicitly Christian. And we said, these are good missions. They just have explicitly said, as we talk to them, they're not explicitly Christian in their expression. And we said, well, we will support you, but not with our missions money, because we believe our missions money need to go towards explicitly Christian missions. But each church still does make those decisions based on your relationships. Shorter route to ordination for clergy. I came in under the 84, eventually the 88 Book of Discipline. I came in as a deacon, and the route was much shorter, and it continues to get longer. Our concern is when people get a call to ministry, all pastors come out of the local church, is that the process will be the call out of them. And so we want to shrink that route. We believe that clergy, pastors should be ordained, they should be educated, they should be trained. But we're shrinking that route. Now some people will say, did you know that there are no local pastors in the Global Methodist Church? Like it's bad thing. And we say, we know, that's on purpose. And I believe your pastor is a local pastor. And so here's the deal. What has happened in the United Methodist Church is we have a clergy caste system. And local pastors don't always have the same voting rights and don't always have the same privileges that no one does. And we said, if you're called into ministry and you've been trained and educated, there's a pathway to be an elder. And so we're going back to the model that I actually was ordained in. You're going to come in as a deacon. And through our vetting ordination process, if a pastor wants to be an elder, he or she has the route to become elder. And so we're just taking that out because we don't believe there should be a clergy caste system. And so that's one of our values. Social witness statements will require greater consensus to minimize divisions over denominational positions on social issues. All such statements will require 75% supermajority to be adopted. And so we're not going to be writing big books about every detail because we believe as we're making disciples, we've got a catechesis that people will grow and be discipled in. And as we grow those disciples, they need to be able to prayerfully reflect where they are as a disciple. And so that's in a nutshell who we are. If you have deeper questions, I know if I haven't addressed all of those on our website, Global Methodist Church, you can explore into that. Our local structures coming. I'll be willing to address any other thing. But I want to just give you a thumbnail sketch of who we are, where we are, and where we're going. That's it.
Questions?
You say conservative, you can find that, you look through a litany of
Yeah.
things, so can you tell us what you believe in each one of those items, where you're good as marriage and the whole litany there?
So when we think about the language we're using is the language that was borrowed going into 2019, where we had separated. When you think about the theological areas, and so we begin to look at who are we. There's the liberals are now called progressives, centrists, and then traditionalists. And so the GM Church's social witness statements clarify and define marriages between one man and one woman while preserving sexual relationships for marriage. One of my ordination vows was So without getting into partisan politics, it states clear pro-life stance on unborn children while calling for greater support for women with unanticipated pregnancies. It puts forward clear and nonpartisan statements on other bedrock ethical concerns such as value and dignity of all persons, oppositions to prejudice, discrimination, concern for the poor and care and for the earth, rule of justice of law, religious freedom. Scriptures are cited in support of each of the GM's social statements, and so on the doctrines and discipline, if you go in there, you can just go in and open those buttons and do a deep dive so that you can look at them for yourself the way that the Book of Transitional Doctrine and Discipline is on the website. You can download a PDF, or you can go in and there's different squares that open up those sections. So you can do a quick scroll and do a much deeper dive. And so as you look, it's more of the conservative stance. So one of the things I've said is if you're comfortable with the current Book of Discipline in the United Methodist Church, you're going to be okay with the Book of Transitional Doctrine and Discipline. The concern we have had is there has been a concerted effort since 1972 to change some of those languages. And while it has been voted on conservatively from a Christian Orthodox conservative stance on those things, our concern is, and the numbers just are not going to be there because the margin of 2019, the margin was very, very tight. And in Indiana, we've already had 143, which is 286 votes. And then you look at across the nation, those votes that are leaving, and so we say the votes are not going to be there. And so probably the 17th time it comes up for vote in 2024, definitely 2028, the current language will probably be changed. And so that's where we would say, if you're comfortable with that change, stay. If you're concerned, what we currently have is where, if you're comfortable in the United Methodist Church currently, you'll be very comfortable because our language is very similar.
Can you be specific as to what it is that you're concerned with changing?
So the presenting issue right now is that all people are of sacred value and worth, but we believe that homosexuality is incompatible with Christian teaching. And that's been the presenting issue, and that language has been affirmed each quadrennium or each general conference. That fight has been over that. And so when you look at the votes, the number of votes, if you do the history, the votes that have held that tension tight, because in the 2019 General Conference, the margin of that vote affirmed it, but the margin was very tight. And then if you look from 2022 and forward, the people who are in the more theological conservative side of the tent are no longer there. And
Your concern is what?
so what?
Will read what?
Well, I don't know. That'll be proposed. But my hunch is that language, what we're hearing is that language be removed. That all, that they're not going to, what I would encourage you to do is read the Beloved Community Report from the jurisdiction. So if you go to the North Central jurisdiction, actually every jurisdiction has the same language. There were resolutions that are pushing that all churches should be able to, that should not be restricted, that all persons, regardless of sexual orientation, could and should be married. And do that. So what we're recommending is as you go to the book of, if you go to the jurisdiction and you read what is being said, that's the direction that, and I don't know, I can't predict it. I just say the votes are not there. And so if it doesn't change in 2024, what's called the restrictive language, because they see that as restrictive language. Some of our centrists and definitely the progressives will say that it should not say that homosexuality is incompatible with Christian teaching. We think that's for us, that is, we're comfortable with that because we believe all people are of sacred worth. But there are those areas, and sexual brokenness is one of those pieces in all of our lives that we should be moving toward wholeness. And so that's the presenting issue. What we're seeing, though, is we already have bishops, we already have conferences that are refusing to support. So our issue has been the United Methodist Church is ungovernable right now. Because even the book of book of discipline that has been voted on, the book of discipline, Siri wanted to talk to me. The book of discipline that has been voted on, the people whose job is to enforce the book of discipline are not enforcing it. And so the last line in paragraph 2553 says, or the actions or the inactions of your annual conference. And where we said is, we're struggling with the actions and the inactions of our annual conference, of our jurisdiction, because the book of discipline hasn't changed. But it's like seatbelts. The state law says you have seatbelts. And the state law is you should use seatbelts. And some people will say, well, I don't like seatbelts. And I'm not going to use a seatbelt. And we would say that the language and some of the things that some people disagree with, Bishop Trimble's even said the book of discipline got wrong, shouldn't be there. So they disagree with it, so they said, I'm just not going to enforce it. And so our issue is the actions or the inactions of the annual conference in regard to some of those things and some of those areas. But that's particularly, and so when you look at jurisdiction, that's the direction we see and we had concern about. Now again, some people are going to look at that and go, that's awesome. I think that's the way it should be. And we would say, then you should not leave.
Then another question, when you call yourself traditionalist, how far back are you going with traditionalist? Without being, women in the pulpit?
No, actually we believe in strong leadership in women, because if you go back to Scripture, many people look at Paul and say, well, Paul hated women. Actually, Paul was very affirming. The Bible is very affirming of women and women leadership. You have deaconesses and prophetesses and leadership. Paul was dealing in a context of a patriarchy, and so he was elevating the role of woman. And actually in that passage in Ephesians, it was actually a harder statement on the men of the culture who could do whatever they want and treat women and children as property. And he goes, women, you already have to do this because culture demands it, so do it as unto the Lord. But men, love your wife as Christ loved the church. And so part of that, so when we go back, we're going back to how we understand Scripture and understand how we see that. And so we would say that, Carolyn Moore, one of our leaders within, she's actually chair of the Wesley Covenant Association Global Board, has written a book on women in leadership. It's an excellent read. It says if we don't have women in leadership, we are missing 50% of the population. And so we have strong leaders that are female as well as male. Actually, one of the pushes we continue to get is, are we diverse enough? And so our leadership is always asking, when we're creating boards, we're creating teams, we're doing that, is we're being very, very intentional to be as diverse as we can. And we're being pushed and requested to do that. Emily?
Yeah, you said it twice now, so I just want to ask, because I'm confused. That Bishop Trimble has gone on record to say the book of discipline is wrong. Where exactly did he...
Yeah, it was a podcast with, I just lost Peway. It was a podcast that they had done together. I think it might have been even the bishop's podcast, but he actually said the book of discipline got it wrong.
Thanks.
I was surprised. I had not seen that, and I was a little surprised if he actually said it.
I had not heard of you.
Yeah.
Where did the goal of the ministry is their full on ministers?
Same places that the United Methodist pastors, the United Methodist Church, so the pastors come out of local churches. Currently, we have a mixture. So some of them are like me. We were former United Methodist, and now we're Global Methodist. We're having people that are Free Methodist, people that are Nazarene, we've got people that are Wesleyan, we've got people that have had a call. They were former United Methodist, and they could not stay. They left years, even decades ago, and they said, I like the direction of the Global Methodist Church, I want in. And so we have the vetting process, the same, I mean, every denomination should have a vetting process. Are we aligned theologically? Can they articulate the theology and all of that? And so we currently have 84 pastors that are officially Global Methodist, and my friend Sam is our church clergy specialist, He's actually working with pastors in our region, helping Angela Pleasance, who is our person globally that is vetting pastors as well as churches. And so we're getting different people. We had a gathering this week, 5 states represented, Indiana being one of those. And so their pastors come out of local churches. And
Well, how do you feel about the age? Do the younger pastors agree or disagree as compared to?
yeah, well, theologically, across the theological spectrum of even of the Big Ten, you have younger pastors and older pastors. If you go on the Indiana GMC website and look at the videos from yesterday, you'll see the leaders that we had leading the team were our younger pastors. I'm 60, I'm in single digits looking toward retirement. I am very intentional, and I've told our pastors that are here, I have got to make sure to vet the next generation and to give them opportunity to lead. But the problem is, across all denominational spectrum, young pastors are not around. We're just not seeing them. But a friend of mine, one of my mentors and friends, just moved to North Carolina, and he announced today on his blog that he has been hired to be a planting pastor at age 70. So we don't think age should be an issue. Actually, Bishop Jones preached today, and he says, you need to know who are you going to be when you grow up. Who do you want to be when you grow up? And he goes, I'm not talking about age, I'm talking about maturity. And regardless of our age, he looked around both services, and he goes, whoever the oldest person is, and thankfully he didn't call him out. He says, I would ask you, who do you want to be when you grow up? And he calls us all into Christian maturity, and all of us are called into ministry. I mean, Moses was 80 years old when he started ministry. It took him 80 years to be prepared for ministry. And so we want to do away with ageism as well, and we find the best alignment. One of the pastor friends, they're in the process of discernment and leaving, but he goes, I didn't fit the profile. He was an older pastor. They asked for a young pastor with 2.4 children and a picket fence, and maybe a dog or two, may or may not have been a cat. And he goes, I didn't fit the profile. And they said, he didn't fit our profile, but he's exactly who we needed. And so we're looking at how do we have the right fit? And that's why appointments are so important. We're not moving to a call system, because I went to seminary with some people in a call system, and they always said, everybody has 1 or 2 good sermons. And so the benefit of an appointment system is we do know your track record. We do know who you are. We can vet you. We also know the needs of the church. And so we work. And so while I was being snarky about the experts getting together, that absolutely is the benefit of the appointment system. People do get together, and I know that Catherine has, when they profile a church and they put a name up, they spend multiple times in prayer and discernment, and to get the names up there, and they pull up their desire is to pull off the right people, so the right people get up to the top, and they spend time in prayer and reflection to be able to go, who's the right person? And so when we look at that, our desire is continuing in that same tradition. We're going to modify a little bit to give the church a little bit more say on the front end, but we believe that the right fit to do the right area of ministry in that season of that church is the most important thing.
Of the churches in Indiana that have been approval, how many ministers have left?
Oh, I wish they were here. We have 64 churches, so 143 churches have left the United Methodist Church in 2022. There was 10 or so that left in 2021, something like that. I can't remember. But the real wave has been 2022, 143 churches. 64 have officially aligned with the Global Methodist Church. There's another handful or 2 that are in discernment and will probably come our way in the next couple of months. Some have just gone independent. We believe when they need a pastor, they'll probably knock on our door. Majority of them have left, but I don't know a percentage, so I want to be careful not to tell you because I really don't know. My friend monitors those, that's his job, that's what he lives in. Definitely over half, over 2/3. And so we aim. There's a church up the road where I know the pastor said, my church is leaving. They actually went independent, and he was reappointed as a United Methodist pastor. The majority, but I can do some research. If you give me if you take one of my cards, I'll get you the number. I just don't want to tell you a number and be wrong. But we're definitely the majority. Yes.
If we would go to the global, we don't have a vote on that. We would go to disassociate, disability, become global Methodist. Then I take a nap for like 6 months. I wake up. What would be the biggest difference I notice?
So locally, nothing. That's what I told our congregation. Locally, you're not going to see any difference. We put a tarp over our sign on highway. If you've ever been in Kokomo, Highway 31 was known as 15 stoplights. And now it's 931 because they're building a bypass and they're wanting to create a freeway between South Bend and Carmel. And so we have to take down all of our signs. The signs can't be any more than 8 feet tall. And we are in the most visible section in town and have become invisible. And over the last couple of years, in a partnership with a friend of mine who is staying United Methodist, we said, how do we reach our city? And both of our churches have become invisible in the most visible sections of town. And we were talking, we saw our church's life cycle had gone down, and we were talking about new life cycles. And we're saying, how do we reach our city better together? And so when we looked at that, we said, we've got to get back on the radar. So internally, I told our people, we're putting a tarp over because we've got to get back on the radar of our community. So this looks janky, but we're being janky on purpose. And we got to tear the sign down anyway. So we used it as a tool to get back on the radar for the community. But I told them, internally, you'll see no difference. Because what's wild is I tell you about the Global Methodist Church, most churches go, but that's who we are. And I'll say, yeah, that's who you have historically been, which is why most churches are not aware of the conversation. What our concern is not what are you doing on a local level, but how is the alignment of the larger denomination. And our concern is you at least need to have as much information to make sure you're aligned with the larger organization. We have been concerned with the larger organization, and so the alignment comes in the larger organization. Now the benefit, because there was a church outside in Northeast Indiana, and they go, we're a small church. What are you going to do for us? And so we recommend people, if you think you're going to grow because you're a Global Methodist, you won't. Because if you're not growing as a United Methodist Church, you're not going to grow as a Global Methodist Church. You've got to make sure you understand what's working or not working and be the healthiest church you can be. What we want to do is support you the best we can. We think if you cannot stay United Methodist, we believe we're your best theological alignment. But if you don't think we're your best theological alignment, we'll honor that and we'll help you find that best theological alignment. We've got a guide with 10 different churches to let you start that research. So locally, you probably won't see any change. But when they are concerned, as things happen, because when 2019 happened, there were open letters sent to Indianapolis and Fort Wayne and around the nation that said, we are so sorry, and our cabinet members and our conference staff and United Methodist pastors' name were on that. And that did harm to our local ministry. And so we were concerned with some of the things in the larger United Methodist Church. They did harm because our people said, hey, we heard this is happening now in the Western jurisdiction. Hey, we heard this is happening. And hey, what's with that? With the letter after the 2019 General Conference. And so what we discovered is we have people not coming to our churches because we're United Methodist, because of what's happening in the larger church. And so that's where we said our best alignment, being a part of the United Methodist Church, was actually harming our local ministry. And now some people, there are churches that being aligned with the United Methodist Church is helping theirs. So again, it's an alignment issue. And hopefully both sides and multiple expressions can win more people for Jesus Christ. We just got to stop fighting. So locally, you'll see very little.
Is the insurance and the pension that's now that we now have, is that simple? How's that handled the same way?
Yeah, so the United Methodist Church has a defined benefit, which is why we have an unfunded pension liability. And so the Global Methodist actually has a 403B model because we think the defined benefit is part of that problem. And so I did not retire. I chose to transfer my membership. And so my defined benefit actuarialized into my UMPIP. My pension as a Global Methodist is a 403B. So now it's just like in a bank where you have different accounts. My Global Methodist Church is a 403B model, so our pension model is 403B. I believe it's, I'll give you the form, don't quote me on this, but it's $5,000 and up to 5% matching, no, 5% up to 5,000 matching, and then pastor can get personal share. Very, very simple spreadsheet. And then the insurance, when we left, we didn't know. My wife and I said, we feel like we cannot stay and we'll take whatever hit there may be. So we since know that the insurance for the Global Methodist Church is actually the same insurance that the Indiana Conference has. We did not know that every annual conference is different. We thought they were all the same. We discovered that's not true. So the Global Methodist Church actually has the same. So in Indiana, nothing changed. I have the same program I had as a United Methodist. Actually, I increased our vision and actually am paying slightly less. Which I don't know how that happened, but those are things that for other people to worry about. But Rick Van Giesen is our benefits manager, and so we download what those are as we move forward. And those are on the website in the FAQ section to look at that. But for in Indiana, it's the same. It's the same. Yes?
So if we technically own our own building, we do our own building insurance and liability and things like that?
You're still doing that. I mean, as a United Methodist, you still pay your own insurance whether you own the building. You don't own the building, but you're paying insurance for the building you don't own. And for us, because of the time frame we went, because we were one of the first waves out, and things were being figured out as we went along, we didn't get out at the last minute. We didn't get out at the 11th hour. We got out at 11:59, and one of those was insurance, because we had to be able to have identified an insurance carrier. We were going to step back and go back with our previous insurance carrier. Now that people have time and can make those decisions, most people stay with the same insurance they had. They just have to be reconfigured because you have to get a new EIN number, because as a United Methodist, you're an entity as the United Methodist Church. And so when you disaffiliate, you become a local entity, you'll get the deed to your property, and you'll have to get a new EIN number, a new tax number, and redo some of those accounts. But many people, we would have, but they didn't send us their insurance paper in time, and we just said we were hitting a deadline, so we had 2 quotes, and we sent it with one of the quotes we had. But we're going to go back to our other insurer now that we've got a little time. We were first wave out. But if you want to keep your insurer, they will keep you and stay with you and insure you. Yes?
2 or 3 weeks ago, might have been a month ago, on the national news, they covered that some conferences, some states have had their conference, and they named about 4 states where several hundred have been disaffiliated. Do you have any statistics on that person? I know there's going to be a time till they are totally out and then have the decision where they're going.
Yeah, so Texas is an anomaly. Texas is always Texas, no matter what you do. Actually, North Texas, 50 to 75% of the church is disaffiliated. And so basically what they found is their United Methodist Conference became their Global Methodist Conference. And Texas changed their money funding was, they said, we're going to cover it. And so their disaffiliation funding structure changed. Rio Conference in Texas hasn't voted yet. Central Texas has voted. East Texas has voted. But Texas is an anomaly. North Carolina has left. Indiana, so you get the South. So you get Texas, North Carolina, I think South Georgia, have already left. We've had 3 convening conferences for the provincial annual conferences. Texas, two in Texas, actually they're all related to Texas. Indiana is a little differently. We're actually the 5th or 6th number, and when you look at the churches, the number of people that are disaffiliated, Indiana is 5th or 6th in volume. But as we look at creating a local provisional annual conference, we're probably going to be more of the norm. And so I talked to Bishop Jones today, who just was a former United Methodist bishop in December. Now he's a Global Methodist. And I said, what was your biggest surprise? And he said, how different every annual conference is. And so one of our concerns is that everybody would function fairly. But every conference is different. Every annual conference is very different. We're concerned that in Indiana, not every district's the same. And so we just ask, let the same thing be the same thing. And so even in Indiana, we would hope that every district would function with the same dates, the same fairness, the same guidelines within every annual conference. But every annual conference is different. And so with our neighbors, I mean, so if you look at Michigan, Wisconsin, the 2 in Illinois, our last exit ramp is the exit ramp you're just learning about. You've got certain dates. Your superintendent will tell you what those dates are. They're on the website, and you'll know your time frame, and she's helping you guide through that time frame. It'll be ratified this June at annual conference, effective probably July 1. That's what our numbers were. What's interesting is you look at just the states connected to us, that's their first exit ramp. Illinois, I think, is May. Northern Illinois, Wisconsin, they have 17 steps they have to go through, and if they miss a step, they're done. There's only one exit ramp. Michigan has 2 this June, and then they're doing a special called session in November. And so every annual conference is different. When we passed out our disaffiliation guide, just lessons we learned, if people couldn't stay and they were on their way out, we put together a 19-page guide that said, here's stuff you need to know, just to help people. And I sent that around to the nation and said, hey, here's some things we learned. This is Indiana-centric. At that point, last year, 5 annual conferences were non-starters. North Georgia, you probably heard about North Georgia. That's probably one of the most, well, there's a couple of annual conferences. Florida, North Georgia have been really, really painful in how the bishops are choosing to handle this conversation and process. As the bishop left North Georgia, she said, yeah, we're just going to shut down the conversation. And so there's no chance to leave. So we do truly appreciate the Bishop of Indiana and the Indiana Cabinet, because they are one of the most fair. Texas took as many restrictions away and made it the easiest. Indiana is up there at the top as one of the fairest ways possible to do that. Now, the reverse of that is that's probably why we also had and have the majority, the 5th, 6th largest disaffiliation. But Indiana has always been conservative. Indiana has always been a conservative conference. And so when people have those understanding, most people in the pew are concerned about the direction. And so we just invite you to be in conversation. What God called you to do in this local level? Where's your best alignment? If you like the direction, go read about the jurisdiction, read about what happened at this past annual conference if you haven't read those. So you will know, as I shared with Bishop Trimble, in the next 2 years, this will change. And if you read the Transitional Book of Doctrine and Discipline in the next 2 years, that'll change. The Global Methodist Transitional Book of Doctrine and Discipline will change very little. It'll be tweaks. Our concern, now I'm not being prophetic, and it may not change, but I know the votes historically, and the votes are not there. So our concern was, our best alignment was no longer with the United Methodist Churches, with the Global Methodists. If you feel like your best alignment is with the United Methodist Church, stay. You've got good leadership, you've got people that care for you, you've got a superintendent and her husband giving up their afternoon to be here with you to help guide and make sure the process is fair and you're getting accurate information. That you need to pray for your superintendent, you need to pray for the cabinet, you need to pray for conference staff. They are absolutely stressed out. Pray for them. But if you cannot stay, they have been kind enough and are one of the kindest to let people that cannot stay out. But just understand, this is your last exit with paragraph 2553. Your choice after that is to close your church, negotiate a price. And so the challenge is, trust level is so low right now. And so not everybody feels comfortable doing that. And so that's where we were, is that was the pathway out. Any other questions? We continue to pray for Bishop Trimble and the cabinet. Marty, you guys are having a hard time, and we pray for you regularly, and know that this is not easy. I've got people that were my friends and my mentors that stopped talking to me, and I was surprised by that. I did not think that was going to happen. And so we see relationships breaking because my philosophy is we can still be friends, we can still do stuff and still do ministry together. My friend and I, he was from day one we had lunch, and he goes, how do we reach our city? And day two, we said, hey, General Conference is coming up. His plan was always to stay United Methodist. I knew the direction I was going, and we said we can still do ministry together. And so we can still reach people for Jesus. And the problem is the fighting. People are paying attention to us for fighting, not for the ministry we're doing. And so the relationship has to end. It's not healthy anymore. And so that's why we couldn't stay. And if you can't stay, we just invite you to give us a look, have a conversation with us. If you can't stay, we're still friends. Still pray for you as I drive by Highway 31 and as we cut through town.
Thanks everybody for coming.